we will have a discussion panel about the Singapore sound, moderated by my friend Clarence Chan from Bandwagon. So Clarence and panelists, please come on up. And yeah, the sound of Singapore. Thank you.
I am running lightning speed, like a car on fire, running through the street, away from all this empty speech of the girls on screen, so overheated.
Okay, hello everyone. It's good to see many familiar faces here. So the song you just heard, it's different from every other introduction song on InnoFest, and that basically is a track by Jasmine. It's 600D. Well, I heard that we have a lot of programmers and tech people in the house, and it's interesting that most, if not all, of Jasmine's tracks are all numerically titled. So you may want to check that out. So, hello, I'm Clarence, the founder of Bandwagon. We are a tech-driven music media company, and our goal is to really champion and spotlight music in Asia. Today I have with me great friends in the music industry with a lot of experience, and each come from different parts of the music scene. And our goal today is really to share with you an insight into the industry that we operate in. I think music is a really powerful, universal medium that cuts across language, that cuts across racial divides, that cuts across cultures. And there have been really many interesting ways that brands have used this universal tool as a means to engage their audience and create meaningful engagement. So with that, I'm just going to get each of them to introduce themselves, and let's get this started.
Sure. Hi, my name is Ziwei. I'm from the National Arts Council. I work in performing arts and music, and basically the Arts Council is a stat board, and we are charged with nurturing the development of the arts, as well as to bring it to different people in Singapore. Did you want me to talk also about the work that NAC does?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, so in terms of what the NAC has done since our establishment in 1991, a lot of our work has been in terms of funding up infrastructure in the arts. So you will see all the venues that have come up in the past 20 years or so, as well as content. So we've been doing a lot of funding for festivals, for creation of albums. When we took over the contemporary music portfolio about 4 years ago, we started the EP grant, which really was giving a lot of good support for young and upcoming bands, as well as music acts, to put out their first EP as well as albums. So I think in a period of about 3 years, we funded about 70 to 80 albums. And I think part of that result of all this funding is that we've seen a tremendous growth in terms of people attending the arts. Attendances overall have grown tremendously. But I think one of the challenges that we've noticed is in terms of ticketed attendance. People paying for tickets have kind of stagnated. So the result of having much more activities, but a ticketed audience that is limited and not growing with it means that there's more work to be done in audience development. And that's why about a year ago we started this initiative called Here 65. So do check it out, here65.com. Is partnering Bandwagon, and the whole goal of this initiative is to raise awareness and support for Singaporean music. So on the website, you'll see we've created a whole section pulling together as much of the music created by Singaporean musicians over the decades, so that there is now one solid place that you can go to if you want to listen to music of different languages, different genres from different eras. We are also creating content about musicians and music on it, and more excitingly, we've created a function where we're hoping to develop a community of people who write and share their thoughts about Singaporean music. So there's a lot more work that we're doing with that in the coming months, but that's something I wanted to share because we do see the need to expand the people who are interested in the arts, and for myself is in music. So that's where we're at right now.
Great. Thank you. Mahito-san?
Hi, I'm Mahito, pronounced like the Cuban drink, both an A. I'm with Sony Music Entertainment Japan, where I head off the business development for Asia. I wear many hats, but one of the roles I'd like to share with you today is introducing new live event halls in Southeast Asia under the brand name ZEPP, Z-E-P-P. ZEP is a 100% owned subsidiary of Sony Music Entertainment Japan, and we have halls in 6 in Japan, from Hokkaido up north to Fukuoka down south, and we started our very first Singapore hall in Jurong East a year ago. The concept of ZEP is to have a plug-and-play hall, series of halls where you have a standard set of audio, lighting, staging equipment. So it's easier for you. It's easy to use by artists and event promoters. And we'd like to bring this to Southeast Asia to have circuits. We're working with Kuala Lumpur. We already concluded a deal for Kuala Lumpur and Taipei, which are planned to be open in 2020. We also plan to open more event halls in Southeast Asian region territories. So if any of you out there are interested in partnering with us during the same concept for big cities in Southeast Asia, please feel free to approach me after the panel. Thank you.
Jasmine?
Hi, so I'm Jasmine Sokko, and I make my own electronic music. I started out about 1.5 years ago, and I played Ultra Music Festival last year, just opened for Chainsmokers about 2 months ago, and have cumulatively about 5 million streams on Spotify so far. And I think what I'll be looking forward to is always to create new content, definitely. But what keeps me excited is always on the lookout for new ways to create content. Like recently been delving into figuring out whether it's a good idea to do like a VR 360 music video and stuff like that. So yeah, this is really exciting.
Great, thanks Jasmine. Syaheed?
Hi, my name is Syaheed. I work with a company called Believe Digital Services, which is headquartered out of Paris. My role with the company is basically oversee Southeast Asian and Australian, New Zealand operation. And what we do is basically we work with independent artists and labels and the community, and to provide them with digital distribution service. So equally a software as a service kind of model, but at the same time with teams on ground across these countries to be able to allow these independent actors to essentially, fundamentally get the music online onto Spotify, Apple, Deezer, YouTube, and all that, to assist them with the monetization process, assist them with optimization process, and also provide expertise on ground to help them figure out strategies in which to tackle markets. So it is a company that kind of was created with the realization that the business model of music is changed immensely. The roles of each persons and professionals within the industry has also changed. And so what we have decided to focus on was like, we're the experts in this area. We're going to give 110% so that the artists and the labels who need that excellence and that service are able to get that from us. Yeah.
Okay, so when we prepared for today's panel, one thing I told them is to really speak as honest as possible, to give each of you a very authentic insight into our music scene. And I guess the first question we want to talk about is the evolution of our Singapore music scene, good or bad. So, how far we've come, what are some of the cycles that we have witnessed, and also where are we now? So maybe Syaheed, would you like to start the ball rolling?
Sure.
In case you didn't know, Syaheed was also the manager for Lion City Boy and Six as well. So share with us some of your thoughts, please.
Yeah, my journey through music has always been about really starting from the creation side of things. Like 15, 16 years ago, I started first as a producer, wannabe artist, wannabe rapper to be specific, but that didn't quite work out. And so, you don on the suits and start to work with other artists who are just as passionate and have the talent and ability. So over the last, when I started in the industry, it's like, it was doom and gloom because Napster was already around and there was no money in the industry, and so I didn't have that. I would say I don't have the hang-ups of the before of what happened before that steep decline. I came from the time where, wow, this is awesome. I can get whatever I want. I can produce whatever I want. Things were available. So the music scene was also equally as adept because Singapore as a whole had never had a continuous cycle of popularity. We've had kind of like pockets of artists being really, really popular, really, really exciting, and then it kind of fizzled out, and then it came back again, and then fizzled out, and it came back again. And so in the last 5 years, we've actually on an uptick where everybody's a lot more excited about Singapore music once more. And I think that's because the ability for the artist to create, you know, has literally been kind of unbound from those confines of, you know, how can I present to fans? How can I access the people who then love my music? Are they bound by Singapore? Are they, you know, available worldwide? So I think that has actually kind of excelled and really kind of given the artists and the labels a lot of opportunities to actually reach a fresh and new audience, and that's, I think, created a lot of excitement. And then, you know, that's also, that excitement translates to the audience coming back and saying, wow, you know, this is really pretty cool, and they've got this success over there, and I've never heard of this guy or girl before, and, you know, so I think we're at that point where it is exciting again, and we need to continue to keep that excitement up.
So Tsuwei, the National Arts Council recently ran a really interesting national music survey, and for some of the marketers or the startups here who are keen to know, could you share some insight, because I think that kind of shows a bit of where we're at in terms of the music scene.
Sure. Well, it was the first ever nationwide survey. So we surveyed 1,000 people. It was door-to-door interviews, and we selected the people so that it's representative of the Singapore population. So I think we can say with some certainty when we talk about the results that it is reflective of the population's consumption behaviors, for example. I think what Syaheed shared is very true. I think we are in this era where there is a lot of excitement about music because of the accessibility that technology has afforded audiences. There's this almost palpable sense of everyone is looking for music, having streaming services, having videos available online so easily makes it so easy for people to want to consume the content. Unfortunately, because it's the first survey, I don't have that trend data, but as a snapshot in 2016, we know that 9 in 10 people have listened to music, and 7 in 10 regularly on a daily basis, which is really high as a starting point. And I think it's a very exciting time to be, I guess, in this industry with a lot of optimistic news. At the same time, yesterday we were also talking a little bit about this. What that has resulted in is also that there is also a lot of noise now. It's exciting because even people who are not musically trained now can have a way to enter into creating music. I was just outside and I saw Gritty, which is that lovely grid thing where there was this Israeli musician performing on it, and I thought how wonderful it is to be able to visually see how music is made and even participate even if you have no background. Oh, you can't hit a wrong note in there, right? And they were over there, the Esplanade over the weekend for the Flipside Festival, and the interactions that the crowd had, the children had with the equipment was wonderful. But I think the challenge for musicians and the industry is really how do I cut through this noise now that there's all of this out there.
So Mahito, you come from Japan, which is the second largest music market in the world, and you've had a few years, you know, in Singapore, really being here and experiencing the music scene. What are your thoughts about it?
So like in my introduction, I told you I wear several hats. Another hat I wear is I'm a director of a company called Sozo, S-O-Z-O. And we basically do Japan content-related events in the region. We did a recent partnership with Alicia's company over there, Elephant. What I've seen is that a lot of these Singaporean fans or local fans, they tend to look at different genres of passion than maybe the J-pop mainstream. Back in the day, like 1980s, 1990s, when Japanese TV content was popular, I think mainstream J-pop was more well received in Singapore. However, now I think instead of the mainstream J-pop, we can get access to or get more traction with the fans locally by having them, related to anime or games. So our strategy at Sony Music Japan right now is to use some of the platforms that we have, like Anime Festival Asia, which is one of our flagship event for Sozo in Singapore. For 3 days, we have over 95,000 people attendance. So like Game Start events, we want our artists, we want to introduce our artists from from Japan through passions like gaming and anime. I'd like to share with you a story that I had my very first time in Singapore going to an anime-related event, or anime song. We call it Anisan for short. I was a little hesitant of how the local fans would receive the Japanese lyrics. I mean, I thought there might be a language barrier. I was also concerned about the ratio of seating area versus standing area, because I had been told that Singaporeans were more reserved. They wanted to be seated during the time of performance. But to my pleasant surprise, the venue was sold out, and I found all these fans singing in Japanese and jumping up and down simultaneously to the extent that the floor was vibrating. So I was like, wow, this might actually work. So that's how my story is.
Nice. Thank you. Okay, so this is InnoFest. So we want to also delve very quickly into technology and innovation. And I think here, looking at the questions, the discoverability factor stood out to me. And Jasmine, you've basically come really quickly in the past 1.5 years. So perhaps share with us your journey as an artist and how you leveraged on technology to get where you are today.
Okay, so basically when I was young, right, what I did was I played guitars, I cover music, like how many of the musicians started, right? We were fans first. And just growing up, I realized that I'm really bad at instrument. Like my friends can do the solo, guitar solo in that 1 hour, where it would take me about 5 hours to do the exact same thing. So when technology kind of happened, like when Syaheed was sharing the time when there was a whole disruption and piracy coming on, right? That was also the time where electronic music, dubstep, is on the rise. And programs like Ableton Workstation are like torrentable. So, back then, me and my friends, we just want to create something and we want to just try this out. And that was basically how I discovered electronic music and how to make it. And it's really mind-blowing to me because I have like really bad rhythmic sense. But because there's a whole program right there, you just have to like click on the button to create the drum beats and all. So it's really amazing how like when someone who is not really good at instrument, can come together to put like bass layers, guitar layers, vocal layers, and drums together to make a song. So I think this whole technology thing kind of lowered the barrier for people that previously did not have any musical background to try out and just practice their creativity. It's a shift in that sense. Yeah.
So like 600D, right, is the song that already has 2.2 million plays on Spotify. So, yesterday we were talking about, how you got on that playlist on Spotify and how that actually jumped in terms of the listenership for that song. Tell us a bit more about that story and how 600D became so popular.
It's funny because I didn't plan that out. 600D was actually my filler song. The song I had to rush out within a week because the EP was supposed to launch like in a few weeks' time. So 600D was something that I created in a week, right? And putting the song out there, I thought it was just really simple. I didn't think a lot about it. Yeah, but because today's music is so driven by streaming, you kind of have to know how you want to push a certain song. And to be fair, I think I was pretty lucky, but at that same time, I was also tracking the algorithm, like how did the song gradually graduate from a playlist to the next. And after it graduated to a bigger playlist that has like 2 million listeners, what should I do? And it's kind of like a whole like give and take thing. When you see your song is doing well on its own, right? It's a push by Spotify, right? And different players. So you have to react and kind of jump onto that hype and push it even further. Yeah. And I think what's interesting to me is realizing how there are different consumption patterns as well. Just being in Singapore, this is what I heard, that most of the time we just go to a playlist, we listen to it, And what I heard is in Philippines, people actually have the habit of curating their own playlist, personalizing. So, I mean, just taking these facts into account, like, you will know that playlisting it will play a huge part in Singapore. Yeah.
Okay, great. I think we have one question here that I would like you and Syaheed to respond to, and I think it's a question about revenue streams. So as an artist and someone who interfaces a lot with artists, helping them to go on your iTunes and go on Spotify, what are the main revenue streams for the artists today?
Okay, well, the artist is actually not limited to just music streaming services or in the music purchase at the moment. That is the first port of call, and at the moment where streaming services are kind of best positioned is actually it's a great discovery tool for the next step and opening up other avenues for them to monetize. So it's really down to like streaming, it is down to merchandising, it's down to ticketing, live concerts, it's down to brand endorsements, it's sync deals, publishing, ability to work with brands and other companies, making your music attractive to them to use it in their own application as well. And all those are ways in which you can, monetize the artist, develop the artist, develop the music that comes afterwards as well. So I think the artists who are really, really savvy, they don't kind of limit their mindset to just, I'm just going to create this music, put it up online, and then, Spotify doesn't pay me enough, and blah, blah, blah. I think that's completely the wrong approach. It's really about exploring all the various kind of like tent poles that they can extract some money and value. Ultimately, it's down to the relationship with the fan and how they can monetize that relationship with the fan, how engaged they are. Yeah.
So Jasmine, how about you? What are your main revenue streams as an artist, and is it a viable profession here in Singapore?
Wow. Okay, that's a lot of questions. Let me think. So, in terms of revenue-wise, I agree with Syaheed. Like, being an artist doesn't mean you only earn from the revenue from streaming. There are many different layers to it. There's performance, there's brand collaboration, you can license your song, and there's also music video. There are many things going on. And, even though it seems like the streaming amount coming in, right, it's lowering and all that thing, but you can actually see how streaming functions like a way of reaching out to people as well. Just knowing how people listen to playlists, and that is the first point of contact with your song, kind of helps you reach out to new audience, and from that new audience you are expanding your audience base, fan base, and that's not a bad thing, that's a great thing, right? And from there people would go to attend your performances, so it's a very multifaceted kind of solution that we're adopting today. So it's not a bad thing, it's just a new scene where people have to learn how to adapt and play the game. Yeah.
So you just did something with MasterCard, opening for chain smokers. I think that was huge. You also did something with Gucci. Tell us more about that and how did actually brands work with you?
Okay. For the MasterCard one, I guess I was really surprised how they got me on board, but what happened last year was when I released one of the song and I was signed under a Dutch label, just because like these days music is so digital, things can happen from anywhere, and they pushed the song, and somehow Chainsmoker noticed that song and they reposted it on SoundCloud. So that was one point of relevance that I see why I opened for them when they came over 2 months back. So it's a very interconnected kind of solution and strategy.
Very nice. Okay, we have another question which I think is really interesting, and I'd like Mahito and Sue to chime in on that. And that is, what does it take to bring our local music culture here in Singapore to be something like what we see in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and even now China? So Mahito, coming from Japan, I think you're perfectly placed to start this answer off.
That's not a very easy question. It's actually pretty tough, and I don't think there's one way to do it. But one aspect, I think we've discussed this in the past, but I think one way is to focus more on how to get some of these artists outside of Singapore. I think the Singapore market itself might not be sustainable enough. But at the same time, we have to foster or nurture the market in Singapore. And I'm not just talking about like artists. When I talk to parents in Singapore, it's like, I want my kids to get the O levels, A levels, get to a good uni, get a good job in finance, banking, or legal. What about music? There's other very respectable jobs in the music industry, and not just being a singer. You can be a songwriter. You can be, another thing I see is there are not enough talented technicians, like sound engineers, lighting engineers. We have so many music events in Singapore, but I don't think we have enough of that. And we can do that in the region because you have the language too. You have, a lot of these technicians, they know English, Chinese, and Malay. You can really work on the region. So I think that's on us. We have to really work on the music industry and be able to make more careers in Singapore. Another thing is, I'm not sure if this is the right approach, but if you don't have a good enough or big enough market in your home territory, you go outside. That's what Korea did. It wasn't so sustainable. Like Japan is just too big of a market in itself. This is a different topic, but they don't have that urge to really go outside. So that's a different challenge. But Korea, they had to go outside. That's why you have like BTS is like #1 Billboard right now. You have like Psy, Gangnam Style. These people are trying to go abroad. I helped out create a joint venture in Japan for one of the biggest management companies for Korea called JYP. And what they do is they really go abroad. They have their talents trained. They have a facility in the US, like a nice studio, dorms, where they polish up their English, dancing skills, and be able to perform at top notch. So they really target the outside market. But like in Japan, it's a little different because they have the big market, but also there's a tendency for the fans to want to grow with the artist. So it's okay for the artist not to be so polished, but fans want to be able to say, oh, I knew them before they broke. Before they made it big. So that's kind of like you want to grow, the same mentality where they want to grow together. So it's different markets. So I think Singapore really has to find what's unique about it. Singapore, the music market, also the fans, also the artists and the careers. I think those are some of the challenges that I'd like to highlight for Singapore.
Thanks. Actually, if I can jump on that point, I think there's one thing that's interesting about Singapore in terms of, or two things about Singapore that we kind of have to figure out. One is how to ensure, as what so we're saying, like we have to build that infrastructure of companies and people that are willing to continuously invest in the talent and have the ecosystem supported as well. And we've lacked that infrastructure and lacked that group of companies and individuals that believe enough in it. I'm also part of the Music Society Singapore, and that's been a big part of our mission this past year to actually look at how do we address it, and working with NAC or working with any other partner to see how we can fill that gaps with the infrastructure. And it takes, the other thing about what you said, like it takes a lot of passion, a lot of like blood, sweat, and tears. It might take a long while for us to get to a point where the foundations are correct for us to build upon. The second challenge that we all have is essentially a matter of language and where Singapore is positioned in the world. So in those markets, they have a healthy domestic market, partly because they have a unique language that kind of is a natural environment for that to exist on its own. But it's not an excuse on our part. What we need to realize that if we are conversing in, producing in English as a primary language, or even in Mandarin or Tamil or Malay, we have to basically rise up to a level that operates competitively with the rest of the world. So if it's Malay or Indonesian music, we have to operate at that level. If it's Thai, Mandarin or Hong Kong Cantonese music, we have to operate at that level. And same thing with English. We have to basically get to a point where our production, our skills, our ability is at that level where we can compete fairly or unfairly with US, UK and Europe as a whole. We have to have that determination towards that excellence for us to compete at that level.
Yeah, just jumping off what Syaheed was talking about. I mean, I completely agree that the language thing has much to do with it. I guess the flip side to that is that we have multiple languages that actually makes us more accessible. And we're just having a side chat earlier on, and while our Chinese may not be perfect Chinese, but I think it lends a certain tinge that helps us stand out. So if we look at Nathan and Jodong's success in recent years, part of it, I think, is the charm that comes with them being able to speak Chinese in a certain way that is quite Singaporean. And that helps us stand out from the noise that's out there. And I'm glad you brought up SG Muso as well, because I'm hoping that in the coming months and coming years, we are able to work more closely together with industry organizations like that to really do more for the music industry. NAC has recently announced that we're opening up a freelancer center to cater to the needs of freelancers across the arts industries, and music is made up of many, many freelancers. So I think in setting up this center, we're able to interface more with SG Muso, with Musicians Guild, to offer different types of services, but also to identify certain gaps. When you talk about sound engineers not being enough, can we work with then the industry associations to do more for that particular area as a strategy? And beyond that, it's also about international recognition, right? It's not so much just about the small market, but I think we have the potential to reach out beyond Singapore because of the various languages we have. And in the coming months, actually, Here 65 will be putting up a Singapore showcase at Big Sound in Australia, which is one of the biggest industry marketplaces in this part of the world. And the idea is that through these platforms, we're hoping to establish a brand for music made in Singapore, whatever that Singapore sound is, right? I don't think any one of us can really pin it down, but to really brand it out there, and with the accessibility that technology brings us, I think our artists have a fighting chance to be in different markets. Yeah.
Right, so thanks to Wei. I really want to get through some of these questions here, so maybe 2 minutes to each of the questions. So firstly, what are some of the make or break factors that have affected musicians' careers? I think Zui, you guys, NAC has funded a lot of musicians for their EPs, and as a government having the macro view, you've seen a lot of musicians that have come and gone. And so what are your thoughts on this question?
It's hard to answer in 30 seconds, but I would say, like you mentioned, mindsets is a big difference. I think being able to change the mindset to have a more supportive outlook for the arts and for music is critical, and that's why we have Here 65, and Here 65 can't do it alone. And I think we are looking at working with different partners to kind of make that mindset shift, both in terms of people around the musicians and the music industry, people working in the music industry, but also to then consumers as well, right? Being able to support our Singaporean artists and the music that they put out.
And so, for companies or startups who have heard this today and are keen to help, who are keen to work more with the music industry, how are some ways that they can be involved?
Well, this technology, right? So I think there's a lot more that we can do using technology in the performing arts. So I would love to have some chats with some of you after this session if you are curious to see how we can infuse some of the technologies that you're developing to bring music to the next level, both in terms of production, in terms of creating, in terms of engaging people, in terms of just reaching out.
Jasmine, any thoughts?
I think in terms of visually, if companies that are doing AR, VR, drones, you want to try something out, you want to have some kind of new branding onto it, there are ideas we can always explore. In terms of marketing, branding, linking up with different brands, I've seen some of the AI startups that functions on algorithm, helping you link and reach out to brands and bigger players, different people that are relevant. So I do see a lot of opportunities in everything coming together.
So Syaheed, you deal a lot with the bigger music companies. So this question here is about how these bigger music companies are leveraging on technology to help artists gain more visibility. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, one of the key things that has been, the biggest transformation for music is that there's so much more transparency and so much more data that we have access to that we can actually figure out and make better decisions about what steps to take next. So a company like Believe, what we place a big emphasis upon is giving back the analytics and data. What are consumption patterns like on Spotify? What are consumption patterns like on Apple? How are your streams going there? What are retention rates? It's how many people are actually listening, how many unique people, what are their demographics, it's a ton of data sets that is then presented to them, and you have someone to go to still kind of help break it down, because then with limited budgets, right, everybody has limited budgets, so if you can kind of just direct and market to that group of people that you know is responding to your music, it's going to actually translate in better results. So really the whole the whole distribution element right now is like everybody does it. It's super simple. It's complex, but it's super simple in these days and age. But it's how do you interpret the data sets and what's available, and how do you act upon those bits of information that is actually kind of being the deal breaker at this stage. Getting onto the global market is easy, but there's a lot of noise, and so now the technologies that we are focused upon is how to cut through that noise. Yeah.
Okay, with that, I think we've come to the end of the panel. I think all of us here will still be around, so if there are any questions that you haven't had the chance to ask, feel free to reach out to us. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.